Hey y'all, it's me, Queen J, back with another episode of season 3 of the Let's Get Uncomfortable podcast. And before we get started in introducing today's topic and lovely guest, we're always going to start with a bit of mindfulness, and that's never going to change. That is one constant that I'll always have. So, without further ado, it is now time for us to pause, breathe, and relax. It is now time for us to open our minds to begin exploring new ways to navigate around healing within this lifetime. It is now time for us to enter a space where we can receive love and give love to ourselves or to one another. It is now time for us to collectively take a moment to just center ourselves so that we are open to receiving new methods, new teachings about healing and moving past some of the things that we have previously experienced. I've started calling them ghosts. So it's now time for us to collectively acknowledge the ghost with love, compassion, light, whatever feelings may come up, but enter this space free of judgment. Allow yourself the time and space and energy just to have that grace held there for you in just this moment. Take some time to breathe if you need. Take as much time as you need. But always know that the choice that you're making to heal yourself, to improve yourself day by day, is well worth it. All right, y'all. I hope that brought y'all some peace and some tranquility because it always does that for me. That was nice. I like that. All right. Without further ado,
I'm
though,
feeling very comfortable now,
yeah,
Queen J. This goes against the name of your
I
podcast,
know,
but
right? But it I know, right? But it sets your mind in a space where you're ready to actually dig into, okay, what are we talking about?
it's
You know?
absolutely the great way to start.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Um as you guys can tell, we have a lovely guest. This is Dr. David Clarke. And I'm so excited to dive into what we're going to talk about today. But so one of the main topics is we're going to touch on obviously how we can heal ourselves, but we're going to dig a little bit deeper and look at the neuroplasticity of it all and just kind of figure out what new method, would it be fair to say new method? Okay. What new method or science that Dr. David Clarke has in store for us. So go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, I'm Dave Clarke. I'm a physician. I'm board certified in gastroenterology and internal medicine. And I had a pretty normal practice for
Mhm.
most of what I did. But for about a third of my patients, which is normal for most physicians, they didn't have any organ disease or structural damage to explain why they had pain or illness.
Mhm.
And most of the time, physicians kind of throw up their hands and say, you know, this is probably all in your head. It's not real. You're neurotic. You can't handle your
Yeah.
own stress. There's nothing we can do for you. We can't diagnose you. You're going to have to live with it.
Mhm.
Uh, and the truth is, not a single one of those assumptions is correct. In fact, for most of them, the exact opposite is what's true. Because if you know what to look for, if you can find the stress, the trauma,
Mhm.
um, adversity in a person's childhood that's still affecting them, some other challenge in life,
Yeah.
then you can uncover what's going on. You can address it. You can treat it successfully, and people get better. Sometimes from some very severe situations.
Yeah.
So that's what I did since the 1980s. Over 7,000 patients, and
Wow.
um, nowadays I go all around North America and Europe, teaching healthcare professionals and the public.
Wow. And has there responses that you've, since you're, going around the world basically and teaching, them these methods, are they receptive, or are they like, oh, we don't even want to? Are they receptive?
People sometimes are initially a little skeptical, but once they
Mm,
learn how to do this, once you see this, you can't unsee it. And
yeah.
the physicians love it. One of them took me aside at a conference, and because this is 40% of the people who are coming through the door of a
Yeah.
primary care office. One of them
Mhm.
took me aside at a conference and said, "These ideas had put the joy back into my work." Because
Wow.
all of a sudden she knows what to do with this 40% that's coming through the door.
Yeah.
Uh, and it just goes from making you want to bang your head against the wall because you can't diagnose what's happening
Yeah.
to seeing people get better. And that's why the doctors went into the business in the first place.
That's
And the
true.
patients like it too. As soon as they recognize themselves in the kinds of questions that I ask. And the same questions are available on symptomatic.me, which is
Mhm.
the website of our nonprofit.
All
Just a
right.
dozen questions, take you less than 3 minutes, and give you a lot of information about what might be going on beneath the surface if you're having a unexplained physical illness.
Okay. So walk me through a little bit. What are some of the example questions that you are asking on your site?
Well, the first one, obviously, we want to know is, have you been checked out to make sure you don't have an organ disease or
Mhm.
a damaged structure? You got to get the medical evaluation first.
Of course.
But if you have had that done and
Mhm.
they're not finding what's wrong, or if they think they found what's wrong, but the treatment for it is not working the way they expect, then
Mhm.
you've got upwards of a 90% chance that this is a brain to body condition. The brain, it turns out, um, is capable of causing pain or illness in your body of almost any severity, any duration of symptoms, multiple symptoms in different parts of the body,
Mhm.
uh, every bit as severe as those caused by diseased organs or damaged structures.
Yeah.
So if it's not if the answer is not being found in the body, we need to look at what's going on in the brain. And from there, we need to find the stress in a person's life that's responsible for the changes in the brain. Because the brain is actually anatomically different in this condition. There's a real physical cause
Oh
going
yeah.
on. You just
I've
can't see it
noticed.
in the body.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot of the times, like, I haven't, me personally, I haven't seen a neurologist or anyone, but a lot of the times, like, through the work that I have done on myself, they have definitely told me, like, the chemical balance in my brain would be different, or, certain things like that. So it's interesting that you provide such a space where, honestly, you're asking people to take a honest look at themselves and be honest with you about, hey, have you had this medical diagnosis, or have you done these things? And then if they haven't, you branch off from there, which is, like I said, I think that's really phenomenal. So um would you say it's more so like uh providing people with a pathway to cure chronic pain, that maybe they're just like, okay, I'll just live with it? Would you say that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We call these neuroplastic symptoms
Mhm.
because the neuro part is obviously refers to the nervous system and the brain, but the
Mhm.
plastic part is very hopeful. In medical jargon, plastic means a capacity for change. Most people have
Mm.
heard of it in terms of plastic surgery, and what plastic surgery does is it changes your appearance. A
That's
neuro
true. That's true. Okay, okay, I see the correlation. Okay.
So neuroplastic symptoms have a capacity to be changed if we can
Mm.
identify the stress that's going on. And sometimes it's very simple. One of my patients, the only time he got his pain was when he was driving to work.
Mm.
When he was driving home from work, he was fine. And on the weekends, when he was not at work, he was also fine.
So it's
So
work.
you see, I mean, you just diagnosed it right there. And
Wow. But I think that that's interesting when you look at, like, because I took like a stress management course in college, and one of the things that I will never forget. I had this book and it had all these different lists of stressors, right? And it was a stress management course. I was becoming stressed over having to read the material and like potentially falling behind. And one of my friends at the time, I remember they were like, I think you're doing the opposite of what the like I don't think in a stress management class you should be getting stressed over the stressors that it's just pointing out to you, unless those stressors are something that you actively have going on in your life and you need to assess. And I was like, ah, that made a lot of sense. But if you thought about it from a different lens, uh, give me just a second. Sorry, I had a phone call.
Yeah, no worries.
Um, but if you think about it from the lens of like, oh, okay, so this is a stressor. This is something that I don't have control over, but I'm causing it, or not I'm causing it, but I'm allowing it to affect me deeper than what I normally would. That definitely can pose some challenges within, like, your healing. It definitely was a roadblock for me. But then when I discovered it, I was like, oh, these are the areas that I need to take a look at for sure.
Yeah, well, that leads into another whole important area, very important area, because it affects more than half of my patients, and
Mhm.
that is that if you were under stress as a child, if you went through pretty much anything you wouldn't want for a child of your own,
Mhm.
um, anything that would make you sad or angry if you saw it happening to a child you care about,
Yeah.
that can have a long-term impact on you, well into your adult years, and
Yeah.
it can also not be recognized what it's doing. A lot of my patients were still being affected by their experience as a kid, but they weren't really aware consciously of how it was affecting them. And
Hmm.
it can take stresses that are going on in the present day, such as the ones you were reading about in your class,
Mhm.
and magnify them, make them much bigger than they would be otherwise.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are just, they're not aware of the
Yeah.
amount of stress that they're experiencing from that cause.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, cuz I know I think about that a lot. Like I told you, I do. I am moving past PTSD, navigating that and everything else. So certain like memories will come up, and I'm like, okay, it's not happening now, and that's why I was referring to everything as a ghost now, because it's not necessarily happening in this moment, but it's something that my brain remembers. It's something that is still a part of me, but not a part of me to the point where like this is happening presently. It's just a past, it's a former thing. It's something that did happen that does have effects. But it's interesting when you say that it can have long, like, so essentially what we're talking about is adverse childhood experiences, correct?
That's right, exactly
Okay.
right.
So when we're talking about adverse childhood experiences and you say that they can have like a long term effect in going on into adulthood, can you give a little bit of a snapshot of what that could look like?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens in three major areas of life, but I
Mhm.
want to emphasize that a lot of people, when they look back, they will tell me their childhood wasn't that bad, or that,
I know, I don't know what it is. I don't mean to cut you off, but I don't know what it is, Dr. Clark, where it's like I literally I had a trauma informed care training for my job, and I kid you not, she started off with, "You guys ever watch the Making of a Murderer, or any of like the murder like mystery shows on Netflix, or they're like I'm a murderer, I'm a killer or whatever. If you
no, I
watch
haven't seen that.
if you watch any of the episodes, any single one, there's always going to be a person that starts their story off with, "Oh yeah, my dad was a drunk, or my mom was addicted to drugs," or they'll talk about it like in such cavalier ways, but they'll be like, "It wasn't that bad though. I mean, my childhood wasn't too bad." And then they go into
And
like the most horrific things, and you're like, "It was awful. Are you okay? Do you need a hug?" I don't know what that is. I don't know if we're like dismissing it or.
No, it's because none of us has a parallel life we can compare with. It's
Yeah.
if we had the adverse childhood experience life, and we
Mhm.
had the life out of some 1950s situation comedy, like Father Knows Best or Happy
Yeah.
Days or whatever it is, and the two lives were going along next to each other, the one could say this is bad, to the other one.
Yeah.
None of us has that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when people look back, it's all they know. So
Yeah.
what I do in that situation is I ask people to imagine they're a butterfly on the wall of their childhood home, and they're
Mm.
having to watch their own kid or a child that they care about
Mhm.
growing up in that same home, and they can't do anything about it because they're just a butterfly on the wall. They just have to watch for even just a week or so.
Mhm.
And what's it going to be like watching their own kid try to deal with that situation? And that helps people get a lot more accurate sense of what they had to overcome. And
Wow.
that's an important exercise, not to re-traumatize
Yeah, yeah,
people,
yeah, no.
but to help people get a real sense of how much they overcame, so they can actually feel good about themselves that they survived it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is beautiful. That's a very beautiful, like, frame to put it in. It's interesting because sometimes I'm a poet, so I always think of stuff in, like, metaphors, and I always think of, like, if these walls could talk, you know? So, like, I definitely like that ability to kind of take one out of it and put them in someone else's shoes, almost, like, in the sense of the butterfly and everything. That's nice. What was the other 2 things that you said one of the first things, that was the first thing.
Yeah, that's something I always try to address with people.
Mhm,
If they're telling me, on the one hand about some terrible thing that they went through,
mhm.
and in the next breath they're saying, it wasn't that bad. My
Yeah.
very, very first patient was telling me about her sexual abuse as a girl, but she was telling me in the same tone of voice that you'd use to read a grocery list.
Oh
That you
my
didn't see
god.
any emotions there at all. If you didn't know better, and because I was a beginner, I didn't know better,
Mm.
you would think she, fully processed that trauma and moved on. But in fact, she was 37 years old, and it was manifesting in her body in a kind of a severe way. And I
Oh,
was
wow.
very fortunate that the psychiatrist at UCLA not only cured this patient, but taught me a lot about how she did it. And that was how I got started in this field. But to
Wow.
get all the way back to your
No,
question
no,
from
no, it's
about
okay. I'm listening.
okay, from about 5 minutes ago, is the three main things that manifest after ACEs in adults: personality traits, triggers that we've talked about, things in the present day that are like the ghosts
Yeah.
that bring back the ghosts of the past.
Yeah.
And then finally, the emotions is the most difficult. People who have very powerful emotions, but they don't know they're there. And they can be like dormant volcanoes on the outside and have boiling magma on the inside. And
Mhm.
they don't know it's there, except maybe every once in a while they'll have a huge outburst of emotion, whether it's anger or something else, for
Mhm.
very seemingly very little reason. And they'll be going, where did that come from? And oftentimes we can trace it back to experiences they had as kids. The personality traits that can be stressful for people that they develop when they're kids in order to survive those environments. They try to be perfect.
Hmm.
They try to help everybody else. They try to be the best kids they can be. They are so focused on the needs of others and taking care of others that they don't take enough time to put themselves on the
Yeah.
list of people they take care of. They don't play very much. They tend to choose people for relationship partners that are not very good for them. They'll choose people who have issues or needs or problems similar or parallel
So
to
what
the
they've
what they
experienced.
experienced growing up. And so
Mhm.
they try to solve those problems for the person, and the relationships become very unbalanced. They're giving and giving and giving to this other person, and they're not getting a whole lot back. Sometimes they're getting bad stuff back. They're in with somebody who's not very kind to them, and
Yeah.
that's what they're used to. So they try to be more perfect so that the person they're in a relationship with won't treat them so unkindly,
Yeah.
not ever appreciating that, you know what, they actually deserve a lot better than that.
Yeah, definitely. That's sad because it's so real, and it's one of the realest things that I think, like, my friends and I, we have these conversations all the time, especially with, like, my upbringing and some of the things that we've experienced, and we've talked about, honestly, what you just said, how a lot of us have this tendency to be like, okay, well, this person was really great. This person is really good. And then, like, slowly you find out that they're not so great. And it's almost like, I think it's kind of parallel to the, this is going to sound probably weird, but what you just said, it's parallel to the experience from when they were a kid, right? But it's also, I think it's another level of like what the child didn't get. They look for that in the other person almost, and that's what keeps them there. That's what keeps them like, okay, well, if I just do this, then this can be this way. But when that doesn't happen, I think they're met with like some type of disappointment, or like you said, that unbalanced partnership for sure. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
people can be so hungry for a little bit of affection and support
And they
that
settle for anything. And they don't
exactly.
realize that they're settling. That's the scary part. It's because that familiarity piece of like, okay, this is what I've experienced before. This is what I know. This is what I'm comfortable with, you know? So because of that comfortability, it's like, I think that that is what scares a lot of people from finding better a lot of the times. And
Yeah,
even just in self-improvement areas, like I can imagine that there are several people that are like, well, I mean, I get asked all the time, like, what made you start therapy, or how did you even find a therapist, and all these other things. But I feel like there's always this level of like fear because you don't know what you don't know. And therapy will make you get real with yourself, and not just therapy, anything like this will make you get real with yourself. I think people don't necessarily get comfortable with the idea of looking in a mirror. And that's why I said, like, you asking these neuroplastic questions, these questions that you're asking forces someone to look in the mirror a lot deeper than what they would normally do, and just be like, oh, okay, okay. But they now have to, like, okay, did you actually go through this, and or do you recall moments like these? Like, I think that that's very, it's it's prompting introspection, which is really good.
yeah, it is really good, and I agree 100% with everything you just said. It's hard for people if they grew up in an environment where they were mistreated and they were coming away with the idea that they're second-rate human beings or worthless human beings, and
Yeah.
ask somebody who has that idea of themselves to look in the mirror. That's pretty uncomfortable.
Yeah.
A
It's
big
pretty
question that
scary.
I try to answer about my patients is,
Mhm.
what did you learn about yourself as a child that isn't true?
Wow.
Did
See,
you
I
learn?
like that you say, "What did you learn about yourself as a child that isn't true?" Because I feel like so often it would just be, "What did you learn about yourself?"
Yeah, and I have to say that in our society, from the larger society, not just from your family, but from the larger society, there can be the same negative messages for people of color that send a message and try to force an assumption of negativity upon you.
Of course.
Um, it just adds to everything else.
It does. It makes it, not to speak for all people of color, but it definitely makes it harder for you to take those steps of progress, or to even, to be completely honest, taking the step isn't the hard part. It's acknowledging that you even took the step in the first place. It's after you've taken these steps, it's like when you have a setback, or you have something that kind of takes you back a little bit, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, in whatever aspect. when you keep getting knocked down and you keep trying to make these strides and you're like, okay, I just keep getting hit. It's kind of very um it becomes less tangible to hold on to the hope that you had when you first started. And it becomes less tangible for you to understand why you even started in the first place. So that's why I feel like we do need reminders as uh people of color that we are not just second rate human beings, as you said. We are of value in the sense that everyone is of value. And if you're seeking self improvement, that's more than enough, you know. And like you said, those messages are definitely hard, and it is Black History Month, so whew,
Yeah,
shaking everything up.
yeah. Well, it's also, everything you just said is a reminder that we need more therapists of color,
We do.
um, because um, something like 86% of psychologists, for example, are white.
Yeah.
And, they're not necessarily going to be able to get into a discussion like this in a credible way with a client of color.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
Whereas a therapist of color, there's going to be an instant rapport about
yeah.
all of the issues.
Yeah, there's a different there's I so I've had 2 therapists, and my first one was a white woman, and she was amazing. But I remember, just to get off track here for a little bit, I guess I could tie it in. But
We are on track. We are definitely on track.
okay, cool, cool. Um, I had this experience in college where I had 3, white female roommates, and it just wasn't a good experience overall. I thought it was more of a positive, like, "Oh, let's just be friends." Like, I thought it was more I received the situation to be completely different from what it actually was, and in reality, it was they didn't want me as their roommate. And so they were, like, devising a plan to get me out, and it was a long, long, complicated story, but the feelings that I was experiencing, like, going into my room were like, okay, you know that feeling where everyone's, like, just talking, and then all of a sudden you walk in a room and they just
They
stop?
stop talking.
I was like, "Okay, I definitely just heard noises." So but I didn't like, that's more, like, covert, like, you wouldn't think that that's a form of a racist thing, or you wouldn't think that that's even a problem with you per se. It could just be they just didn't wanna talk about the topic, right? And I kept telling myself that, but it was going on for, like, weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was like, okay, something feels off now. But because I had a white therapist at the time, it took everything coming to like this big boiling point for me to finally like say, all right, this is what's been going on. And one of the things that I will never forget about the session was that she was like, well, Janae, why haven't you said anything about this? Like, you've been coming in here for about a month, now, and you haven't mentioned this at all. You've talked about your family. You've talked about how stressful your career is potentially going to be. You've talked about all these other stressors except for the main stressor that was affecting you. Do you think that I'm racist? And I was like, no, I don't think that. I just I told her that it's hard to have that discourse when you don't look like me. And I don't know if you're going to 100% get it. In fact, you may never 100% get it. And that's not a problem for you guys. That's, you know what I mean? That's not a slight against you guys, but it's more like, as someone of color, I don't want to have to keep repeating like, okay, yeah, this is what's happening, but I think, like you were saying, to echo what you said, I think it becomes so normalized that these experiences are just like, okay, like, as someone of color, this is what I'm going to experience, like, which is so disheartening and so heartbreaking because I just think it's messed up regardless. But to your point, it is a lot easier to get on with my other therapists who I don't have to necessarily like state explicitly, hey, I'm going through X, Y, and Z, and this is why I feel this way. I could simply just be like, well, what happened? You know what I mean? And it's instant like, well, who did it? Like, it's those little social cues that like I don't have to necessarily articulate that kind of make it alleviate the pressure almost. It makes it less heavy, to be
Yeah.
completely honest.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, if I was your therapist, you'd have to take some time and work and explain things to me and be
Mhm.
watching to make sure I really get it. And,
Mhm.
you as the client are not supposed to be having to do work, right? I mean, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of where we are because
Yeah.
I never will ever have lived it.
Yeah.
Um, and I need to have it explained to me.
Yeah.
Uh,
However, I do appreciate anyone that's willing to have it explained to them and not in a way where it becomes okay, but that's everyone's lived experience, where it becomes like just this mundane thing because it's actually not so mundane. And it seems mundane because we see a lot of it, especially where I'm at in Cincinnati, like with a lot of the recent things that have been happening. But it's interesting to see how conversations can get started from certain things that have happened. So, but I definitely agree. And don't get me wrong, everybody needs to be educated for sure. But I think it becomes a big burden for someone to have to continuously carry when it's like, dang, Google exists and dang, you know, like you said, it does become work. After a while, it becomes like exhaustive to a certain degree because you're fighting for something that you have to continuously have hope for. Like I can't tell you how many times I've gone on like my Instagram and I've seen other women of color and other people of color say like I'm tired. And I've honestly been one to say the same thing. I'm tired of educating y'all. I am. But if
Yeah,
we
and it adds to everything else,
yeah.
every other experience that people can have just as human beings. And then
Mhm.
you take all of that stuff and put it on top.
It amplifies everything like you said. It becomes something that you can't really let go of, run from. No matter how much you try, it always becomes a topic. And I won't say that every single issue does boil down to it being a racial issue or a racial disparity, but there are certain cases that you can't just be like, "Oh, that's not a racial thing," because then you're dismissing either one or more people involved. It just depends. It's very situational, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it would make white therapists much better therapists if they could live for a time as a person of color.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how
Well,
long it
actually,
would take, but just maybe it would just take a day, or maybe it would
mhm,
take a year, but just to see to actually live it.
yeah. To actually live it would definitely be a phenomenal, wildly. I think it would balance the scales quite a bit. Like for sure, it would be like because I feel like there are still certain white people that and not I don't know. I haven't had many dis or conversations with white therapists, but they all seem to be the ones that I have conversations with seem to be very empathetic, seem to be very, listen, accommodating and things like that. So I haven't had very many with therapists that are like, oh, that happens. Like, you know what I mean? I've never had that. And I'd be really, really sad to have a conversation like that because I'd feel like we definitely that should be a part of the curriculum and the education towards getting your license and things like that because not all your patients are going to be white and not all your patients are going to be um I guess like you know they're going to be different.
Well, yeah, one of the things that I do for my patients to try to help them in terms of treatment
Mhm.
is to help them recognize the courage and the heroic perseverance they had to have to get through their ACEs, their adverse childhood
Wow.
experiences, so that they can look at that experience as analogous to having been parachuted into a dangerous jungle at a young age and
And
somehow having made their way out of that situation, and
wow.
to respect that child for having for what they did, for what they had to overcome and endure, and that can take that early learning, all of those things I was talking about, the what you learned about yourself that isn't true,
Mhm.
and replace it with the idea that, you know what, you showed heroic perseverance in coming through that. You should think of yourself as not as a failure or as a second-rate person, but as a tremendously heroic and strong person,
A
and
warrior.
a warrior. And I think just connecting that with the discussion we were just having, if white people lived as a person of color for a period of time, I think at the end of that experience, there would be a huge new respect for
Yeah.
what people of color are dealing with every day.
Yeah.
And they would have that same thought that, wow, I had no idea how much you were heroically enduring out there.
That's the thing. It's the endurance part that gets me um every time. Every time, no matter what, because I it's so wild because as a woman of color, there I have my days where I see it as, yes, I am persevering, but I also have my days where I just want to rest. I just don't want to have to persevere. I want the white people days, to put it that way. I want the days where it's just like um they're not so heavy, because believe it or not, even on days where they're super peaceful and they're super joyous, there's always a little bit of like, man, how long is this going to last? And it's not, because I used to think of it as like, I always felt like the waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it's more like preparing, because at some point during the day, or at some point during the month, or at some point during the week, especially with it, like it being the last day of February, and it being the last day of Black History Month, like I can be honest, this year for Black History Month, I haven't been the most present, simply because I don't have the mental capacity to be anymore, because I've been present every single year. And the more aware I get and the more present I am, the more it hurts when you have uh when sorry, I'm not trying to get emotional, but when you have more and more racial disparities that you see, like outside of this, I actually work for a nonprofit organization that is doing tremendous work in the marginalized community. And it's sad because with all the changes that are happening within the world and within our government, um, the work that we do is so monumental, but it's being reduced, or it feels like it's being reduced. So that's just another thing on top of that. It's like, dang, I haven't caught a break all month. Like this month has been, I'm being real, real here, but it definitely has had its its obstacles, to say the least.
Yeah,
But
we are
having this
we are recording this 5 weeks into a new presidential administration that hasn't always been friendly to people of color.
there you go. I was gonna say, if you I can't say it particularly, but you could. No. I mean, yeah,
I'm
no,
trying to be as
definitely.
objective as possible here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's rough. It is rough. I will say that. But and because of that I definitely appreciate us having this discussion because man, you asked me a really good question. You asked me a very good question, a very thought provoking question. I was not expecting that, but I appreciate it. Like I said,
Well, you made a very good point about, again, about um, people of color are always having to be watchful, uh, just a little bit about when that other shoe is going to drop,
yeah,
when something is going to happen that's not good. I mean, the number of times when you can feel 100% comfortable in the space that you're in is less than it is for people who are not of color.
yeah, that is true. I think, but you know what I do to kind of combat that for myself and for my mental sanity? I make my own little spaces. I make my own little like oasis type tranquility spaces for myself because there are so very few. Um, and a lot of those times they circle around being expressive within my art or doing things like this or writing or journaling or just being expressive and being aware enough to get the emotions that are hard for me to articulate on a page just out in the open because I think a lot of us have hidden away from ourselves for too long for the sake of others' peace and others' comfortableness and things like that. And it's like one of the things that I learned while I was in college and I continue to learn is that in a world and a society where people often look down upon us, people of color, for taking up space, and we've been conditioned to feel like anything that we do is too much. It's never enough. It's only too much because someone is not willing to embrace it or they can't do that themselves. That's where it becomes too much. So, in a space where people tell you, hey, don't stand out, or when people say, um, try to quiet you or anything like that, I say to remind yourself, because I remind myself daily that it's okay for you to take up space because you're a person too. That person is just as much allowed to be here and as are you. You're not in the room just cuz you're
Yeah,
qualified to be there as well. And it's hard to see that when like you're saying like society pits us against one another in different aspects and it's like, "Oh, well do I fit in this room? Am I supposed to be in this room?" Things like that. So, it's definitely interesting when you look at it from the bigger picture, especially from a psychological standpoint. It does further echo the message back to you that in a sense you don't matter. You don't have such value, but you do. One of
yeah, and
my
I like.
yeah, go
Sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go
Well,
ahead.
I like people to make a list
Mhm.
of everything that they've had to overcome, whether it has to do with the color of your skin or
Mhm.
whether it has to do with an experience that you had as a kid or in a relationship as an adult.
Mhm.
Make a whole complete list of everything you've had to endure or deal with or cope with,
Mhm.
anything you wouldn't want your best friend to go through. Put it all down. And again, the purpose of this exercise is not to re traumatize people,
Yeah,
it's to help them see um, why they should look at themselves as heroic perseverers.
that is so interesting because like I was saying when I got off on a tangent, I have a hard time viewing myself as that sometimes. I really do. Sometimes some days I'm like, yeah, I overcame it. Yep, I overcame all of these things. But sometimes it's like I think because of the environment that I was raised in, there's this identity that's like it was born out of shame. It was born out of self-hatred to be completely honest because it's like the abusers and just all the circumstances that I experienced, when you go through that as a kid, you don't see yourself as a warrior. As a kid, you see yourself as someone that's weak because that's what they
Yeah,
want you to think, right? That's what they can.
that's that whole idea of being taught something about yourself that
That
isn't
isn't
true.
true. Yeah, yeah,
That's what abuse does to people, is it makes them feel second rate, not measuring up, worthless.
yeah,
Uh, it sends the message that you are not valued as a human being. And when you're a little kid and you're getting that idea from very important people in your environment,
yeah.
there's a tendency to absorb that as a
Internalize it. Mhm.
internalize it as a basic assumption about who you are.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I mean, I want my patients to look back at that and see that that was part of the toxicity that they overcame,
Mhm.
and that it's actually they should look at it as if through no fault of their own they got parachuted into the jungle as a toddler,
Yeah.
and that wasn't their fault. Somebody just dropped them into this situation,
Yeah.
and
That
yet,
helps. That's very comforting. I will say that. That's comforting to look at it from that lens, but it definitely is this takes time. I'm understanding that I'm definitely more compassionate with myself, but it does take time to see it's not my fault. It
yeah,
shouldn't
not
have
only is
happened.
it not your fault, but it's amazing that you came through it.
Yes, it's amazing that I came through it. Yes. Yes, I'm taking that on. I will wear that proudly that I have overcome a tremendous amount and I'll continue to. Like it's interesting that I say that right now cuz I'm kind of going through a lot of changes. A lot of changes like right in this very moment of time.
Good ones,
Uh
I hope.
yeah, I say yes, they are good in the grand scheme, but like the timing of it was not completely unexpected. But we are shifting day to day and we're still persevering. So I can receive that. I like that.
And it changes a lot of things. It's once people flip that self-image,
Mhm.
and I have some of my patients, put their name on a little index card and just say something like "Janae is a hero!" exclamation point, and tape it to their bathroom mirror where they see it every day as a reminder, just so they can start flipping that self-image of theirs a
Mhm.
little more each day.
I
And
love
once you
that.
do that, it changes a whole lot of things. I mean,
It
it
does.
enables you to be stronger in setting boundaries around toxic people in your life. It enables you to take more time for personal enjoyment. A lot of my patients, they just never seem to put themselves on the list of people they take care of, and you can't do that forever. Your body is going to protest
Oh
eventually.
yeah.
So
Some
I want people to set aside regular time for
for themselves.
their own personal joy.
Yeah. I love
But
that's what that's Oh, go
if you
ahead.
don't believe in yourself, you're not going to do it.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. I've had to learn that 1,000%. I think I can pinpoint the times where I didn't believe in myself because everybody else around me believed in me, and I was just like, okay. But now I'm like, nah, I believe in me. Yeah, this is what I do. This is who I am. Da, 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 da. So it's different. It's definitely there's a switch in your confidence. It's a boost, and there's a like it's a flip of a switch. It doesn't
Yeah,
happen that fast. Don't get me wrong,
it
warriors. Don't
takes
get me wrong.
time.
It takes
It takes
time.
time.
This is just an analogy. Like it's like from going from a deep and dark way you feel about your level of self-confidence and now it flips upwards to hey, I got this. Like, you know, it's nice. It's definitely a nice change of thought and action for sure. Um
There's something else that it can
yeah.
help people with. I remember a story about a patient who was telling me that her childhood was fine. Her parents cared about her. There wasn't any drugs or alcohol or
Mhm.
abuse, but mom and dad were verbally and emotionally abusing and fighting with each other almost every day. and she was the only child in this family, and
Mhm.
she was trying to be the peacemaker. So the parents are, like at each other all,
Ooh.
and she was trying to solve that situation, when
Yeah.
obviously as a little kid, she was not solving that situation,
Yeah.
and made her self-esteem just kind of tank every day.
Yeah.
So finally, when she's 8 years old, the parents get divorced, and you would think that might give her a measure of peace after that. But no, the
No.
parents kept living in the same house.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm
They,
no
they slept in
judgment, but that's
separate
just a
bedrooms.
terrible. Why?
I
Huh.
you know, I'd have to know them better to figure out why they in the
That just
world.
sounds bad, but okay, go on.
Well, they slept in separate bedrooms, but as far as she was concerned, the situation did not improve a bit. So
No.
she had to deal with this for the next 10 years until she went off to college.
Oh,
And she's
no.
telling me in every other breath that, it wasn't that bad. I think I've dealt with it. And, she's in her late 30s. She's had half a dozen different physical symptoms that the doctors couldn't explain
Yeah.
for 20 years. And so, fortunately, she had a beloved niece in her life, a 5, 6 year old girl whom she absolutely adored, would take her shopping, take her out to lunch, take her
Yeah,
for
yeah.
the weekend, take her to amusement parks. And so I said, all right, we're going to make you in the same exercise I did before. We're going to have you be a butterfly on the wall of your childhood home, with your parents fighting away in there. We're going to put your niece in there, and we're going to make you watch your niece try to cope with this for a week or so.
Oh,
What's that going to
no.
be like for you? And she just stared at me.
Oh, no. I
She
mean,
was a
this is
very
good, but this is oh, no.
this for like several minutes. I mean, she
Mhm.
was a very verbal person, as it turned out, but she just was thinking about what it would be like.
Everything.
And at the end of several minutes, she says, uh, at the end of a week like that, I would shoot myself. And that was the first time she truly recognized how difficult it
It
had been,
was.
how horrendously bad for her. And the point of that, again, was not to
Yeah,
traumatize her
yeah.
all over again. It was to help her see, you know what? You have to think of yourself like that toddler who got parachuted into the jungle. You have to give yourself huge credit for the what I call heroic perseverance
Yeah.
to make it through that. And she did. She started, her self-esteem, self-image was not all that good.
Yeah.
But once she could flip her view of this early experience, she felt way better about herself. She had one of these toxic boyfriends with all kinds of issues that she was totally focusing on trying to help and
Fix.
support and fix. And she dumped him the next day.
Wow.
And she went with no boyfriend for a year and a
That's
half,
amazing.
which for her was about 10 times longer than she usually went without a boyfriend. She happened to be very good looking, so meeting men was not her problem.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but meeting the right man was a huge problem. But when you think well of yourself, you
Mhm.
send kind of a different vibration, out into the,
You do, yeah. I
yeah,
noticed. What you're about to say, I've completely noticed. I actually have my own little warrior, I guess, heroic moment. Um, Earlier this month, a toxic ex tried to come back, and instead of allowing him to come back, I just was like, I gave myself a day to actually like think it over, but I put myself in that person's shoes and I was like, "Oh, how bad is his life now to where he's reaching out to me because this is what his cycle is. This is what his pattern is, right?" But I gave myself a day, and with everything that I had going on like mentally and just personally, I was like, I don't need that. And at this point in my life, it doesn't warrant a conversation. It doesn't warrant me saying, "Hey, I don't need you in my life." It just warrants me deleting the friend request. And that's what I did. And I was so like the moment that I did it, I was like, this is the right like I've said it out loud because those moments are hard to do.
yes.
Um they're tremendous. The little things like that are huge. But I said out loud, I said, that was necessary. Because I then told one of my good friends, and I was like, yeah, girl, he reached out to me on, on Facebook, and she was like, and I was like, and I deleted it. Oh, thank God. I was like, what did you think I was gonna do? She was like, I don't know. But I was so nervous, but I'm so happy for you. Just go on. And I was like, uh, but I think those moments are tests of like who you are and who you're
Yeah.
becoming. Because
Yes.
if I can tell you right now, I know exactly how it would have played out. If I had said, "Oh yeah, I accept your friend request." First of all, why haven't you talked to me in 3 years? That's probably what I would have gotten, and a whole plethora of other things. And maybe, oh, this is where my life is at. It's in a really bad place. Can you come and help me? Da 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 da. But the cycle would have started back up again, and I had to remember why I left in the first place. It's
And
pretty much.
also have the internal belief that you deserve better.
Oh yes, that too. That's the first part. But I just didn't say it. Yes. I know that better is out there and better is coming for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's what happened with the end of the story of that patient is that
Yeah.
after a year and a half, she met the right guy.
I had a feeling. I love that. It's
And she wasn't even
interesting.
trying to meet the right guy. He just kind of showed up.
Same. Yeah. That's what happens. You're the way you think about yourself when you're in a different, it's funny because like I'm 27 and I first started my healing journey, like really really started to take it serious when I was a junior in college. So that was 2018, and it was a monumental time in my life. But I can now look back on 2018 and onward and see where exactly my level of self-esteem was. So I can see how, like you just said, when you flip that self-image, when you flip your self-confidence, and you actually love yourself, and you view yourself from a different perspective, the energy that you put out is what you're going to receive. So I truly understand that. I truly felt that. And it was interesting because I kind of am in that phase now where like all these nicer people are coming around, and I'm like, who are y'all? Like just a little bit. Not completely suspicious, but I'm like, oh, okay, this is the proof of like what you put out will come back to you. So it makes
Yeah, a
sense.
lot of my patients, when they first meet somebody like
Mhm.
that, they're a little suspicious that,
Mhm.
are you really seeing who I am? Do you really, is the quality that you think you're seeing, is that really there? Do I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
have that? I mean, it's kind of an imposter syndrome
Yeah,
at
yeah.
first. And it's amazing that you did that. I mean, I'm guessing that you didn't go to an HBCU and that you still managed to uh, build your self esteem in the middle of a bunch of white people is that's an accomplishment.
Yeah, that is an accomplishment in itself. But I actually had my own little like community of people. So I went to University of Cincinnati. So they have like different like I call them outlets, but it's called Black Arts Collaborative. So there's different like diff
Communities.
yeah, different communities within one big community, basically. And I was a part of the dance team and the poetry department. And those two programs literally aided me in seeing myself differently, alongside making better friends, understanding like the courses that I took in college were all to help me get through college and get through life. Like there was no course that I took that I was like, okay, I'm never going to use this again. Like I was literally so obsessed with healing myself from the progress of my future, or for the sake of my future, that any course that I took, any minor that I picked up, anything that related to education was all about bettering myself and unlearning the person that I was before.
Yeah, and that's at that age, that's a huge accomplishment.
Thank you.
I have patients who were 20 years older than you were, that were just getting to that point in their life. So
Yeah, I
you did
was told
really
that. I was told that throughout the the building of this business, throughout the making of this journey that I'm on now. Like, everybody older than me has said, "You're only 21. I cannot believe you're doing this right now." Like, most people are like in their 50s and they don't care about their mental health this much. So like, why now? And I'm like, cuz I don't want to. I think what for me, and this isn't any shade, but for me, what I saw growing up was not what I wanted. I didn't want to be in the house constantly regretting anything in my life, or especially regretting um self-investment, you know? A lot of the times I would hear people in my family say that they wish they would have done this. They wish they would have taken these courses, or they wish that they would have explored this side of themselves more, or like actually had the courage to step out and be who they actually are outside of someone else's opinion. I've always been that way. I don't know where it comes from, but I've always been like, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to live my life, not by way of anyone else's rules. Now, granted, when I was a kid, that was a little harder because I was dealing with what I was dealing with. But it was like when I finally realized that the situations that I were experiencing were not normal. That's when I was like, oh, okay, we can make something normal. We can change all of this, and we can heal, we can grow.
Yeah, and someday perhaps be a parent who breaks the cycle and
Oh,
doesn't.
yes. Someday, maybe. I don't know. I go back and forth on that all the time, but I definitely do aspire to continue to educate. And with what I do now, I feel like I'm educating just in a different way.
Well, you are an old soul, Queen Jay. I talk to hosts on podcasts who are
Mhm.
doctors and psychologists and people who are much older than you are, and you understand all of these issues as well as anybody else out there. You do a really
Oh,
good job.
thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Honestly, it's just God. If this is what God has called for me to do, always, ever since I was young. I went from talking Tina to having my own talk show. So I am very, very proud of everything. I love having discussions like this because it always helps me put into perspective whether or not there's more that could be done. Because I think every once in a while, if you're truly seeking evolvement and evolution and things like that, especially mentally, it's always good to get other perspectives, for
Yep,
sure.
well, that's certainly something that has helped me over the years.
Yeah.
I have to say I've learned most from my patients. I've talked to over 7,000 people who've had
7,000.
physical symptoms of pain or illness connected to psychology in one way or another. And I just I listen to them
Yeah.
and eventually figure out where the stresses are coming from. And it's
So
been a huge education in humanity. I'll say that.
I was gonna say I would imagine so, but I have a question that brings me to maybe my second to last question. You say that you help your patients through the physical pain that they're experiencing, right? From just the experiences that they've may have endured, right? But what exactly does the steps to the resolution look like within your practice? Is it, hey, write this down? Is it, you know what I mean? Like, what steps aside from the questions? Yeah.
It obviously it varies with each person, and we
Hmm.
have a lot of these resources are on the symptomatic.me website. We have
Okay.
video courses and recorded conferences, and there's for
Ah,
people who support us as members. There's a self-treatment course. There's
wow.
a monthly Zoom Q&A that people log in and can ask questions of experts. So we got a lot of resources, but it really comes down to identifying the stress that's in a person's life,
Mhm.
and helping them to make changes to reduce those stress levels, whether it's changing the personality traits. If somebody is a perfectionist, but they can see that, for example, that perfectionism grew out of their childhood trauma
Mhm.
and that it really isn't a part of who they were meant to be, then they can make changes. If they think of themselves as more heroic, if you're a
Mm.
hero, you don't have to be perfect.
You're good as
Um,
you are.
you're good as you
Okay.
are. So that brings the stress level down. The biggest one for my most severely ill patients has to do with the emotions. A lot of my patients have a tremendous amount of anger inside about what they went through,
I was gonna
and
say,
they're not aware of it. They don't generally know that it's there. So that butterfly on the wall experiment where you're
yeah,
watching a kid you care about, that helps
that's
people
one
see,
of
if I had to watch that, I would get angry.
yeah.
And if you're getting angry about your own kid going through the same stuff, you can bet that you're also angry that you had to go through it.
Do you
And we want
think
people to connect with that.
okay, so let's say you get someone to connect with the anger, do you guide them through how to properly,
Put it into words.
the oh.
The more people put the emotions into words, and sometimes it's fear, shame, grief,
Uh-huh.
guilt, the more they can put it into words, the less it needs to be expressed into their bodies in the form of pain or illness.
Wow. That's
So
beautiful. You know that's
writing
beautiful,
about it,
right?
yeah.
That's incredible.
It's
That's
it's
so beautiful.
beautiful when it works, which it usually does. One of the exercises is to write a letter that you don't mail, but you write it to
Mm.
the people who mistreated you.
Oh yeah, I did that. That was one of the so I did cognitive behavioral therapy and that was one of my homework assignments actually when I was a junior in college. And I remember writing it and I was like I remember a lot of emotions coming up, but one of the big emotions was I was scared. I was scared that the person that I wrote it about would find out that I felt this way and that was something that my therapist was like, "But if that's how they made you feel, why be afraid of what they made you feel and what you're actually
Feelings
expressing?"
feelings are never wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
They just are.
They just are. And that's what one of my biggest things, like you said, within an emotional aspect, I definitely have had to, because I had a lot of anger. I was an angry child. I was a very angry child, but my anger was dismissed as stuck up,
And
rude,
that's
all these
how it
other
gets
things.
that's how it gets repressed. When
Yeah.
you're told that your anger is not appropriate or not real, or then you have to learn to stuff it because
Yeah.
it you learn that it doesn't get you anything. It doesn't get you anywhere. It's not honored.
Yeah.
And if your own emotions, which are so much a part of your core of who you are,
Yeah.
if those are being denied,
Mhm.
then that means that you are being denied.
That part. You okay, yes, that's exactly oh, these are such I love these conversations. I absolutely love them because they're needed. They're very much necessary, especially when we're talking about because I always well, like I said, I used to suppress and repress my emotions all the time. Heck, I used to repress my thoughts. Like it would just be, oh, that didn't happen. That like but the
You're,
longer that
you're
I
negating you're negating yourself,
yeah,
and
yeah. The
you know,
longer I did that though, the worse I got. The more
exactly.
I had to go to the doctor, the more I had to do these things where, lying to yourself can only last for so long. Ignorance is bliss until it kills you slowly.
The body
It can
doesn't lie.
exactly, the body does not lie. I think that this has been such an interesting and insightful conversation. I'm so happy that you could come on and talk
Thank
about your practice and just talk about what you're doing because it's monumental. I hope that you know that.
thank you. Yeah, it's 50 million adults in the United States, and very few of them are getting the care they deserve,
Oh
and
my
that's
god.
why my colleagues and I do what we do.
That breaks my heart that whew.
Yeah, it does me too. That's why I've been doing this for 40 plus years, because it
So
just
when did Your what did you say? Sympto? No, neurosymptic.
Neuroplastic
Thank you.
symptoms. Yeah, for a long time, I didn't know anybody else was doing this work, and
Uh-huh.
then I wrote my first book, which is called "They Can't Find Anything Wrong," and that
Mm.
that came out in 2007.
I
I
might have
took
to
the
get a
title.
copy.
I took the title from a patient who tried to kick me out of the room. I went to see her because she
Uh-huh.
just came in the hospital overnight with dizziness and vomiting. And she said, "Don't waste your time with me. I've already been hospitalized for attacks like this for the last 15 years,
Mhm.
and
They can't
they
find
can't
any.
find anything wrong." So I
Mm.
said, "Well, why don't you give me half an hour and tell me your story one more time, and we'll see what we can come up with." And it turned out all of her attacks were connected to interacting with her abusive mother. Um, and she was 50 years old. Her mother had been emotionally and verbally abusing her since she was 3 or 4.
Whoa. You
And her
mean to
mother
tell
was
me
still doing it. Mother's in her 70s, patient is age 50. Mother is still doing it.
oh my God.
That's what
But
I said.
so whoa. That makes me think about because like that just honestly makes me think that of just how different all of us as humans are because we all react differently. And like I know for a fact that if I were around my abuser, I know how I get. I actually just had an encounter with him not too long ago. And it wasn't very pretty. I was closed off. I was really, really angry. And it took a dear cousin of mine to get me to kind of snap back to the present moment and not act on those feelings. And it's interesting because I used to at like immediate usually after I see this person, I would be like, "Man, why did I act like that?" And I would talk with my therapist about it. My therapist like, "We have as a child when we go back home and we're an adult and we go back home and we've learned all these things, we still revert back to our childlike ways. It happens. I can be 40 plus years old and go home and I'll be that teenage girl again. You know why? Because that's what our brain remembers. Those are the people that our brain had to come up with these different um survival tactics, right?
That's right.
It's not going to be different because that's why we're thriving when we're not in their environment. Like I saw a video of this woman who was like, "Yes, I'm going home for Christmas." She was dancing. She was like, "I'm going to set all these boundaries. No one's going to touch me. No one's going to give me like unwanted hugs or anything." Like she was just like real happy and everything. And then in the next shot, she's sitting on the couch. She's like, she did go home, but she in fact did not. She set boundaries, but they were dismissed. she she reverted back to her 16-year-old self. So she was an angry and depressed teenager in the room, spending time by herself and eating. And I was like, that's why I don't want to go back home because I'd much rather enjoy the freedoms that I have here,
Yep.
you know?
No, you said it exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a long journey, and that patient was not consciously aware of
Of it
just
happening?
how angry she was. Yeah,
Wow.
she was telling me about her mom's behavior,
Mhm.
perfectly neutral voice, no emotion visible at all. It was all going into her body.
How can you tell when something so I'm obviously an emotional more emotional person who's more in touch with my emotions and everything else. So when I tell a story or when I am talking about something that has happened, the emotion you can sense, like you can feel that, no? So
Yeah, you can feel it, and probably because of that, you're not experiencing as much
pain.
physical symptoms as somebody
Mm,
who was not aware of it. The people
mm.
who feel their emotions, they tend not to wind up in my office.
Oh, that's a word. That's a line right there. If you feel your emotions, you get to escape having it. You will not even escape. You don't even have to be in the office. Just feel your emotions. You'll be fine. That's
It goes a
interesting.
long way. Yeah, you feel
Yeah,
them,
no.
put them into words, validate them, you
Hmm.
know that they have a right to be there. If you're doing all of that, you're not going to wind up in my office.
Have you heard of emotional resolution?
Well, I can imagine what it is. I mean that somebody is aware of their emotions
Mhm.
and is able to move past them.
Okay. Yes. But there's a so I don't know if if you have a chance, you should listen to the previous episode before yours. Um I spoke with Cedric Bertelli, I believe that's his last name, I can't remember. But we talked about his um his scientific research in emotional resolution.
Hmm.
And it's basically this idea that when the emotion comes up, when the trigger happens, right? You can feel your emotion, but don't like breathe through it. Don't just try to not breathe through it. Try to focus on where the tension is being held in the body and allow it to shift within your body. So it's like a somatic response almost. And I'm wondering if you've ever experienced that within your practice, or have you ever tried that as well, or is that something that you've never um
Yeah, my patients usually their biggest problem is that their an emotion is expressing itself in their body, but
mm,
they're not consciously aware of it.
okay, so that'd be more like the extreme version of if someone weren't even like, oh, okay, gotcha. I'm seeing the I'm kind of like they correlate, like the emotional
They
resolution
do.
and what you do, they definitely correlate. But I wonder. Yeah, it definitely has, like, I've been trying to practice it on my own. I really but I don't quite think I'm doing it right because I find myself breathing into the area that I'm not supposed to. So, yeah. But it's definitely interesting. This has been a really insightful interview, and I'm very, like I said, I'm very happy that you can come on.
Thank you.
Do you have
You
any
know,
questions for me?
I should make one more
Yeah, go
point with
ahead.
Jay is that just relates to the shirt that you're wearing is a lot of people um, were their physical and mental health was
Mhm.
literally saved because they could accept the love of a higher power, even when nobody else was giving them love. If they could get love from a higher power, it carried them through. And
Wow.
that doesn't apply to more than a small number of my patients, but for the ones that it does,
It
um,
has an impact.
hugely important.
Wow. But I love that because that's part of my story as well. So like I definitely can I can relate to that. That's a powerful statement that you just made, for sure. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, it's very important for some people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's important. It's important for me. It's what's so ironic is that I find myself like talking about God nowadays with my friends, and I'm like, this is so 180. And they're like, why? I'm like, because before I would be the one that's telling you, nah. like like I'd be the one that's telling you, no, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to go to church. Like that was who I was. And ever since I've come, and it's only because unfortunately in this, and I don't know how often people are aware that this happens, but sometimes when you're in a dysfunctional environment as a child, they tend to use religion as a way to keep you um in the abuse.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's absolutely right there. There's a number of my
yeah,
patients where the religion has been toxic, I have to say.
yeah,
So that can happen too.
yeah. And because that happened with me, I was just like, yeah, never, no. But I will say this, if I can provide any sliver of hope for anyone that's listening, the big transformational point for me was unlearning the God that I was taught
Yes.
and learning the God that I now know and have a relationship with is someone, it's completely and vastly different. You know, if you're interested, find your own church, you know, but Don't do it because, oh, this is what you're used to and this is what, like, that's just condemning every other religion with before even giving them a chance, because that toxicity, as we're talking about, is born out of something else, and it's not for you. It was never intended for you. You didn't plan on having this toxicity, so don't choose it in your future. Don't choose it in your present or your future. In the life that you have control over, control your peace the most. Manage your peace. Maintain your peace the most. If you have to break away from your family members, do it. If you have to break away from anything that is not a mutual relationship, walk away. I know it's hard, but walk away when you're ready. Walk away when you're ready. It's not easy. You can't just, I get it. It may not happen the next day where you're like, hey, I'm done with this guy, I'm done with this girl. It may not happen like that. But have the courage in yourself to walk away eventually. Because it's not gonna get better. It's gonna get worse. I'll
That was
stay.
really, really well said.
Thank you. I'll leave you guys with one last thing. My therapist said, if you have been giving a lot of consideration to everyone else and you've neglected to give it to yourself, listen to this. You have given yourself too much, or you have given them too much consideration. You have considered them too much. It's time for you to consider yourself, whatever way that looks like for you. Just saying.
Put yourself on the list of people you take care of.
Yes. Put yourself first on the list. I know people always say that it's selfish and it's self-centered, but self-care and self-love is not self-centered. It's actually the first thing that we need to do, because we can't get love and we can't give love if we don't love ourselves. I know I'm gonna get on I'm gonna go on a I'm gonna go on a whole spiel, but that love can't exist if it's not born from you yet. If it's not
It's
within you.
it's what the flight attendants always say, put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yes, exactly. Take care of you. It is okay. Anything else you want to touch on? Anything else?
You know, that I was going to say something about the toxic and watchful
Oh yeah.
God. You said it much better than I
I
did. So
mean-
I'm totally done.
All right. Well, I mean, this has been an incredible episode. Um, you already shouted out where your website is. I'll definitely check out your website again so I can get my results again, which
Yeah,
totally
the
fine
12
with.
question quiz.
Yes, the
We put a
quiz.
lot of time into that.
Okay, definitely will. Definitely will. Um, as always, this has been a lovely episode of the Let's Get Uncomfortable podcast. You can always find me at Let's Get Uncomfortable Pod on YouTube, Spotify, and my personal page is at underscore officially Queen J. The Instagram is at Let's Get Uncomfortable Pod. And oh, last little shout out. So, as you guys know, the debut memoir is coming out very, very soon. The girl behind my goodness, I'm getting a little I'm getting a little nervous and emotional. The Girl Behind the Glass is debuting very, very, very soon. So if you want to get your copies before the actual launch, be sure to do that. I will drop the link in the description and below. If you want to tell me where we can get your book, Dr. Clarke.
Yeah, it's pretty much on Amazon these days. They can't find anything wrong. And we have a textbook, but it's written in plain English for people who like science. It's called
Oh,
Psychophysiologic Disorders. And it's got 16 of the best people in the world writing in it.
oh, that's awesome. I love science. Okay, I'm such a nerd. Okay. It's okay. It's okay to be a nerd, but like I don't need any more books. Like I wish I could show you my studio. I have books everywhere. It's so bad. Um but yeah, this has been Queen J with the Let's Get Uncomfortable podcast. Thanks for seeing and hearing me. Peace.